oh, and then we're in a total mess. But you see, we in the West are basically afraid that if we trust our own nature, everything will turn into chaos. We're afraid, as it were, not to keep holding a club over our heads, to keep watching on our instincts and our passions and our so-called uncivilized animal natures, fearing that they will go awry. But you know, when you let go of that grip on yourself, sometimes astounding things happen. You get out of your own light. You're functioning all together in one piece. I mean, after all, a person who is basically divided against himself, who is in inner conflict and is trying to go in two directions at once, he can't go anywhere. He just has to sit and dither. Whereas if I'm going all in one direction, then at least I'm going. And even if I'm going in the wrong way, I can change the direction. But if I'm trying to go in two ways at once, I don't get anywhere at all. Now, artists in the Far East have made a great deal of what they call the controlled accident. Marvelous things which happen as surprises when an artist does not try to dominate his medium, but let his medium itself do some of the work. Take, for example, this cigarette jar that I have here. You see the glaze has just been slopped on it with a swift motion of the wrist. And do you notice, as I turn it, that there are all sorts of little flecks of white inside the black outline there. And little flecks of black, like right here, outside the main band of black. It's incidental things like this, which to the Chinese and Japanese mind, and increasingly to our own way of thinking, make the real beauty of things. For instance, consider a shell like this. Here is an object which any one of you would pick up on the beach if you saw it. And yet, what does it represent? If you saw a painting with markings on like that, you might say, well, that's not what I call a painting. It doesn't look like anything. And yet, as I say, none of you would hesitate to pick that up and treasure it if you found it. For it, too, like the jar, is a sort of controlled accident. And it is the art of trusting the medium to express itself along with your own contribution to it as an artist. When this harmonious relationship of man and nature is brought into play, we get marvelous little objects of this kind. And so in the same way, if we can learn to trust our own nature, we will, I think, be profoundly surprised that things don't go out of control at all, but on the contrary, suddenly come back into control. Take, for example, a very familiar instance. Supposing you're learning to ride a bicycle. Some of you will have known that when you started out this rather difficult art, you found yourself immediately falling over, and your first instinct was to turn the wheel right opposite the direction in which you were falling. And in this way you collapsed totally on the ground. It seemed to be common sense to turn away from the direction in which you were falling, and yet the thing you have to learn to do is to turn the wheel in the direction in which you are falling, and in this way you suddenly come up straight again and you're in control. You expected to fall. You went with the fall, and you came to yourself again. In precisely the same way. when we go with our own nature, our own inner feelings, we come into control of them. We don't lose control. If we fight them, we get in that state of balled upness, of anxiety, of dither, which makes us incapable of doing anything at all. An anxiety and a dither which is comparable to the whole problem of maintaining freedom in a world like ours. Problem that we are in danger of losing our freedom through being over anxious to preserve it. Or think of another illustration. Those of you who live in the East and the Middle West are familiar every winter with the problems of icy roads. But any good driver knows that when you skid on an icy road, you have to turn in the direction of your skid and not against your skid. That again brings you into control. To fight the trend of things, to fight what the Chinese call the Tao, the T-A-O, the way of nature, is to come into conflict with nature so that you can't do anything at all. Or another common example, everybody who ever used a sailing boat knows that if you are going to move, you've got to keep the wind in your sails. Even if you want to go against the wind, you would never dream of turning the boat directly into the path of the wind. So you always have in some way to keep the wind behind you. But when you want to go against the wind, you don't fight the wind, you use the wind. You, in other words, tack against it at an angle so that it blows you into itself. And this is the fundamental principle of Chinese philosophy, which underlies that startling manifestation of it in Japanese wrestling called judo, where you overcome the enemy not by opposing him, but by using his own strength to bring about his downfall. For this is the philosophy of bend and survive, of the strength of weakness, as the willow trees under snow go supple and drop the snow, but the pine with its tough branch piles up the snow and cracks.